So welcome to Teams in Ocean, everybody. Going to hand over to April Dunnam. Please all be kind to each other and have a great session. I'm here in the background if anything goes a bit wonky. All right, speak soon.
Thank you. All right, well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here to give you 5 ways that you can improve your Power App. For everyone that doesn't know me, my name is April Dunnam, and I'm a Power Platform advocate at Microsoft. I make videos on YouTube of the Power Platform. I've been in this space for quite a while, was an MVP before joining Microsoft and all that. I would love to connect with everyone. If you have any questions after this, of course, we'll take questions in the session, but if there's anything we don't get to, or if you just want to connect, you can reach me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to get in contact with me. And then, of course, there's my YouTube channel as well if you want some other videos and content that might be helpful for you, because some of the stuff that I'm covering today, I happen to have corresponding videos on. So it's a great way to get in contact. All right, so I don't know agenda. I think the title of the session speaks for itself. We're going to be going over these 5 tips, so let's just get started. All right, first big tip for improving your Power Apps is to go modern. So modern controls have been rolling out recently inside of Power Apps. So this specifically, that's a hard word to say, and Canvas apps. So who's built an app probably that looks something like this, right? We're all familiar with the classic Canvas app control look and feel, right? It's very boxy, it's very blue. So it kind of gives it away that we're working with a Power App. So we might have built something that looks similar to this with some of the classic controls that we have. Now, what the modern controls are trying to do is make the design aesthetic of Power Apps natively out of the box closer to the Fluent UI framework that a lot of the other applications that we're used to using use. So just this one thing alone can really have a drastic impact on the look and feel aspect of our applications and make them look a little bit more polished and more modern. So we can take something like this, where we have an employee asset request, and we can make it look something like this. So again, a more modern look and feel, something that you can easily see inside, embedded in a team, for example, or something, or along your other products and applications you might be using, and it looks more native and intuitive. So this is all made possible with those new modern controls. And there's lots of different benefits to the modern controls. So this is best demonstrated if we look at an actual real life Power App example. So I'm going to switch over to demo here. So I've been using and trying to upgrade all of the apps that I built over the years to rely more on modern controls. So some of the controls that are modern are out there, generally available. Some are still in preview. So just keep that in mind as you look to maybe upgrade some of your apps yourself to use modern controls. But one really good example that I have here is I had this old, timesheet app. So let me get the right time tab going here. So this is a template that I built probably 3 years ago now. It's been a while for timesheet management. Now it doesn't look horrible, or at least I don't think. It might be a little bit biased. I tried to spend at least a little bit of time making it look okay, but it is showing its age, right? Especially when you get into a screen like this. Now the app itself is a repeatable table. So, you gotta kind of have to do some changing to the formatting there and everything. But again, the formatting is very boxy, very big. I tried to at least change the blue color scheme and do some design, but it leaves some to be desired. So this application that I built here, this template, I decided, well, let me see if I can upgrade it with some of the new modern control standards. So something that you see like this, I've transformed into something like this, which is the modern version. So this is the home screen. Now if we go to the new timesheet screen, you see just right out of the box how much cleaner it looks. Now, yes, I kept the blue. I could easily update the color scheme so you don't have the blue colors there, but just it looks so much better. Now, with the modern controls, one thing that I really love is the modern dropdown. So if we go back to that classic experience with the dropdown, so you got the scroll bar. I mean, again, it's just really boxy out of the box and just not an ideal experience. Now with the new modern one, it just looks so much better. And the cool thing with when you're looking at these modern controls is they're going to react much better on your mobile device as well. So right now we're looking at this on the desktop, but on the mobile, it uses the native capability to render the control. So they're faster and they just look and function better and more seamlessly. So, and the other thing that you'll notice as well, so with this drop down, so this is just a normal drop down control. And the classic one, I can't search for a date in this date picker. In the modern one, that's just baked in. So if I want to filter by the 29th, if the searching is baked right in, I can filter that drop down and select the option I need. So then it has this nice animated effect. So you might notice when I click on one of these, it has this animated kind of underlined blue. So that's all built into the control. It just gives a really nice aesthetic to the app. So that's one of my favorite controls, modern controls, is that drop down. So you'll see that used throughout here. So there's another drop down, and these are the modern inputs. So again, as I click into any one of these inputs, you might notice that subtle underlying effect there with the blue shading there. When I click on each of those. Now that blue shading, this is all customizable too. So if we click on any of these modern controls and we look at the properties, we have this style and theme capability. So we can define the color palette that we want to use for these modern controls. So I can change this if I wanted to change it to maybe a red color palette, I could do that. So there we go. So now you'll notice, so this one I didn't change, it's still that blue, but now if I change the theme to match, I can easily change that underlying color effect with the control. So we do have some ability to customize these with theming, and there's some updates to theming, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in a later tip. But this is a really good example of how I was able to take modern controls and really transform the look and feel of my app. Another modern control I love is this tab control. So again, if we look kind of at the classic experience, like what I had here in the My Timesheets, it's just this boxy, not very appealing, just list, right? So when I upgraded this to use modern controls, I decided it would be cool to have the ability to filter the timesheets by the status. And I use an out-of-the-box modern control called the tab control for this. So you'll see, again, we have these simple tabs with that underlying effect for a consistent look and feel that's allowing me to dynamically filter the gallery below. And you'll notice the gallery below looks better too than the traditional gallery. It has an updated look and feel as well with this shaded effect on the left-hand side. So you can see which selected row you're in the gallery, and it just looks a lot better. So this is using the tab control. So let's just explore some of these controls that we have here. So I'll just create a new blank screen in this app so we can see what we have here. So modern controls is something that you do need to explicitly enable. So before we even get started in that, if you want to see these in your app, you'll want to open up your app in edit mode and go to settings. And then in the general tab here, you should see an option right here for enabling modern controls and themes. So that may or may not be turned on by default. If it's not, you'll just want to go here, toggle this to on, click close, and you're good to go. So then how you'll know it's enabled, if you go to your insert menu here in the toolbar, you'll see a new modern tab for all of these modern updated controls. So these are all of the different controls we have. Most all of them should be available. There's some that are in preview, like for example, the Copilot control, but we'll see all the different options we have. So I showed you the drop-down control. So this is this one right here. Drop down, there we go. So same as a normal drop down, you just bind it to a data source. So if I wanted to see all of the build to locations, for example, in my list, I could do that, figure out the columns I want to show, and then now we have our control. Now, the other one, though, that I think is worth its weight in gold is the date picker, the modern date picker. So again, let's remind ourselves what the classic date picker looks like. So there it is. So we look at a classic date picker, you know, we have the screen and like, oh, okay, I want to select the 26th. Oh, wouldn't it be great if I could just select the 26th and be done with it? No, I have to select it and say, okay. So that's always a pain, and it's really not that customizable. Now, if the modern date picker, if I were to go here to the insert and go to modern and put in that one, so it's this one, this is currently in preview and side by side. So you'll notice just right off the bat, it's less boxy and it's smaller and more sleek compared to a classic control like this. But if we click on that, now we get that native calendar experience that we're used to seeing in other applications that we use. So we're able to quickly browse to the different months. I can select the date, and that's all I have to do. I don't have to click an OK button. I just select the date and I'm good to go. So that's just, I really love that. We have a go to today so we can easily see, and then we have the whole year view if we want to jump ahead to a later month. So I love the modern date picker. Definitely worth looking at if you haven't looked at that one. Some other ones to call out, I mean, we have a ton. I'm not going to go over each one in length. There's a modern form control, a modern header I use a lot. So there's a concept of components, which I'll touch on later. But one common thing that I used to use this for a lot, components, were headers, because I want a consistent header in my applications. Now there's a built-in modern component for this. So it gives us what you would typically want in a typical header. So we have some kind of ability to have a logo. We have a title for what this screen is, and then maybe a profile picture for the current logged in user. So all that's baked into this modern control, and all of it configurable by these properties. So if we want to change the logo, we just change that here. There we go. We can change the title of it. So right now it's screen 1, so it's getting the active name of the screen for us automatically. So we can do that, and we're good to go. We could change, of course, again, the color scheme. So if we want to change that to match our different colors and the font and all that, that's all customizable here. And we can even toggle on or off if we want to show the profile picture. We might not want to show that in our header. So it is pretty configurable and a really good control to use. I see a question in the chat by Philip. Is there a reason not to switch to modern controls? I don't know. Well, okay, so that's a really great question, first of all. The main reasons not to would be, as you'll notice, like I added the date picker. Some of them are still in preview, which hopefully shortly and soon will go to general availability. So you want to be careful just using preview things in general. The other one is, while I love modern controls, at the current moment, they don't have as much flexibility as far as what you can customize as some of the classic controls. Well, the header is a great example. If I were to build this out myself as a component, I could have complete control over everything. Right now, because this is a pre-built control, I don't have as much control of like the positioning of the elements in the header, for example, and things like that. I'm limited to what properties show here. So it just really comes down to, A, is the modern control out of preview and you're comfortable using that in your app at the current moment, and then B, how much customizability, if that's a word, that you need for the particular control. But I find in 80% of the use cases, what the modern control gives me is enough customization and for what I need to for my application, my solution. So, but that would be my take on that. All right, and just touching on a few of the other modern controls that we have here. The other one that I mentioned that I really love, well, we have a spinner. So this was, again, something that traditionally I would have built, say, with a component, and I would have put in like an SVG image, and I'll touch on all this later. But now we just have a pre-built loading experience. So when you initially load your app, if you have a long-running process going on, and you want to just let your user know that, hey, the app is loading, that's an out-of-the-box control now with the animated graphic there. And we also have an automated progress bar. So this is another one. Like I'm finding that all the things that I would classically build components for, they're turning into modern controls, which is great. It's just less work on everyone, less stuff to maintain. So now we can see that for this particular progress bar, we can define a value and a maximum. So if I want the max to be 100, and what do I want that to be set at? Of course, this could dynamically be set with conditions. So you see how the shading kind of goes down as I change this value here. Right? And then if I change it to say 80, so you can see a good indicator if you have a multi-step form or something in your application and you want to show the user where they're at, this is a really great modern control to use for that. The other one, as I mentioned, that I love is this tab list. It's just so many use cases for when you want to be able to break up a lot of controls and a lot of things in your app and make it a little bit more manageable. This is a great control. You just bind it to some kind of data source. It could be a data source directly, or you can hard code some values. So you see right now, we just have hard coded item 1, 2, and 3. It's as simple as that. So, and if you want to use that to filter things, so if I had this tab, I'll just go show you where I'm using this tab effect. So in this gallery below is where I'm filtering based off the tab. So all I do is I have a switch statement. So this is the tab list .selected.value. And then based off of that value, whatever it is, I'm doing different things in my filter for the gallery. So it's a really great control to use. So if you haven't used them, definitely check out these modern controls. They really make your app look a lot better. Okay, the other tip, not as fancy or fun to talk about, I guess, as modern controls, because it's not necessarily visual, but it will help and improve your Power Apps a lot, and that is to up your Power FX game. So Power FX in its own is a big undertaking to learn and all the nuances and formulas and things like that to really add the logic layer to your Power Apps. Now, there are a few formulas that I think and features, I guess, within Power FX, you might call it, that have come out relatively recently that I think will solve a lot of common pitfalls that make your apps not very performant. So one of those being sequence. So this is maybe an edge use case, but I'm actually using that in the timesheet application that I just showed you. So what this function will do is to generate tables automatically to a set number. So that's what I use this for all the time. So it can create dynamic tables of data, and it's just based off of numbers. So you use sequence and you put in what you want to start with and the amount of numbers you want and all that, and you can generate a list of numbers. Now, where this really ties in to make it make sense is something like in that app I was showing you in this timesheet app. So on the new time card, I need this drop down dynamically of the weeks. So I need to be able to go and look at what's the current day, what is the week start and the week ends based off the conditions I put in, right? So that's a lot of logic behind the scenes that needs to happen. A sequence, though, makes it easier. So if we look at where I'm doing this, so I'll switch over here. All right, so I'm actually populating that week list right here, and I'm using sequence for that. So I'm saying I want to get up to 20 records, and then I'm just using some date time manipulation to figure out what the start of the week should be and what the end of the week should be. And I'm saying get me a sequence of 20 values with the start and the end date there. So that's doing that for me with sequence. That'd be something that would be really hard to do if we didn't have this function. And again, I think it's a lesser known function, but it's really powerful for scenarios like this when you need to generate data. Now, the other one that's really good to know is width. So a lot of times when we're writing PowerFX code and we're trying to add logic to our Power Apps, we might do things that are duplicative. So we might need to be able to check to see if something exists in our list with a lookup. And if it does exist, well, then we want to go patch something. Or if it doesn't, maybe we want to patch something else, right? So that could result in multiple lookups to our data source for that one thing. So what width does is it helps us to scope variables within a function. So this really reduces unnecessary variables and calls that we might have, which equals better performance. So this is one example that you might see of how you can use with interest rates and loan amounts and all these calculations that are having to go on based off of data. But another example is within, again, my timesheet app actually. So lots of switching back and forth here. One thing that I love too, like just quick tip, if you want to find out where you're using something, I use this search all the time because it searches across your app so you can see exactly where a particular word is mentioned. So it's good for copy and replace and all that. But where I'm using it in my app is right here on the select of this button because this is the delete functionality. So I need to first check to see if this item exists or not, if it's already been saved, because it might be like an unsaved item in the database. And if it isn't saved, or if it is saved, then I want to delete it. If not, I just want to remove it from a collection. So that would be something that would require multiple lookups. I need to go and look to see if it exists. And then if it does, I need to go also look up the record to remove it. So to simplify that and reduce the multiple calls, I'm using width for that. So I'm saying width, here is the time item object, and I'm doing that lookup once. And then if that, now I'm doing the if that exists. So if this time item exists, I don't have to do a multiple lookup there. And then some different conditions, if it's blank and all that based off the status, then I want to remove that time item from my SharePoint list in this case, which is my time entries list. So this is a really good example of how you can simplify formulas. Now, all of this, there's lots of things involved and it's hard to explain in a short session, but I'll link to some documentation on how this all works so you can kind of get a better grasp of it. Now, the big thing though in this section I want to talk about is something called named formulas. If you take away anything from this tip, it's to use named formulas. So these allow you to create your own reusable properties, and it reduces the need for set and update context and helps reduce app load time. It simplifies your app initiation, and it's really good for static data. So anywhere where you might be loading static data in your app, so common examples, I want to pre-populate drop-downs with the current logged in user. I want to pre-populate a list of customer names that doesn't really change, or a list of countries or state codes or whatever it is. That is a good example of stuff that might not change throughout your app that you might load normally in your app on start and might have some performance implications because it could take a while to load. That's a good candidate for using a named formula instead because it is more performant out of the box. And you'll notice in this timesheet example, I am using named formulas a lot. So in my classic example, before I had all of this functionality, I wasn't using that. So like an example of how you might do this is you go to the app and on start, and you probably have seen a lot of code like this, right? So when my app is initially loaded, I might get the current user, put that in a global variable. I might, for this particular app, I'm getting the week list and the current Monday and all that, and I'm just basically preloading some collection of data, right? That can make your app slower. Now, the modern way of doing that with named formulas is in your Power App in the App tab. Now we have a section for formulas. So if you can get away from ideally putting anything in the on start, because that's just really not good for performance, and using these formulas instead, you'll see a significant increase in how fast that your app loads. So really the only difference is instead of doing like a set for a global variable at this scope, you're just going to define the name of the object. So I'm just saying current user equals user in this case. And now I can use that throughout my entire application anywhere I want. So it's essentially a global variable that you're defining, but as a named formula, a named function instead. So that is more performant. So I'm replacing all of that here for all of my static data. So definitely look at that and see what kind of performance impact you can have there. And this is just a really quick tip here. I won't show a demo of this, but there's a function called launch. So if you want to have a native experience, say in your mobile application, and you want to be able to launch to call someone, to email someone directly, maybe to open the Uber application or whatever it is, to open up the native Maps application on your iOS. You can do that with something called a URL scheme using this launch function. So you just say launch and put in the URL scheme. So common ones we're used to seeing is like TEL and then your phone number to call someone, SMS, and then the phone number to text someone. So these are really common examples of URL schemes, but any app that you're using has its own unique URL scheme that you could simply put in there and have a more native experience. So it's not trying to open in the browser, but it's opening in the native application. And I do have a video on this if you want to see exactly how it's done. All right. Whew, I'm running low on time and I only have a few more tips. Third tip, bring the power of AI to your end users. So AI, we couldn't go through this session without saying something AI related, right? So we can use AI as everywhere. Everyone gets an AI. But what can we do specifically within our Power Apps to improve the experience for our end users? Well, again, right now this is in preview, but you should start looking at it and keep an eye on it. And let's use the Copilot control. So this is basically giving us a way to embed a native Copilot in our Canvas applications that our end users can use to ask questions about the data in our app. So this one thing that I love about it, the concept of it, is it can really reduce the need for a lot of complex views and filtering if our users are leveraging the Copilot to ask those questions instead of us having to build that. And then the other AI tip is to use AI Builder prompts. So we can add the power of this create text with GPT model, which is using generative AI behind the scenes to allow us to define custom prompts that we can reuse in our apps and in our flows. So I'll show you an example quickly of both of these. All right, so for the Copilot control, that is relatively straightforward. So I'm going to switch to a different app here. Okay. All right. So let's add a new screen. And let's do a search for Copilot. So again, this control, just giving a way for end users to be able to ask questions about our data. So there we go. We're going to point that it really acts like a gallery in a way. So you point it to the data source that you want the Copilot to have the context of. So I want to have the context of our issues list here. And then now we can start interacting with it. So I can ask it things like, how many issues do we have? And it will go and use that data source and use GPT to be able to figure out and answer questions about it. So just giving a way to have this chat-based experience to ask questions. So if you have like sales data, like who's our top customer, things like that, it's able to answer questions about your data easily. So this is just a very simple example of what we can do there. Now, the other one is this prompting capability. So a new feature that's recently rolled out is AI prompts inside of the Power Platform. This isn't limited just to Power Apps. We can use this in Power Automate as well. But if we go into make.powerapps.com, and you might have to go to more and discover all and find this AI prompt section. But we can use this create a text with GPT using a prompt button right here and define our own custom prompt that we might want to use in an app. So in the app that I was just showing you, that's an issue tracking list. So if we have like a help desk issue, someone goes and adds that into a SharePoint list and it gets assigned to someone. But what if we could try to triage some of that before it gets assigned to one of our techs? What if we could maybe have the user use AI to potentially get their question answered? Well, that's what I did with this prompt. I have a prompt that's actually in our Power Platforms prompt repo, which I'll put a link to in the chat here. But I'm basically telling this that I want you to act as an IT expert, and I'm going to give you an issue, and I want you to give me a very bulleted list of steps that I can try to take to solve the issue. So I'm giving it really detailed instructions, and I'm allowing to pass in what the problem is, and then this prompt could go and call the GPT model in AI Builder and return information. So once I define this prompt here, which is just text, defining what I want the model to do, I save that, and now it's available here as a prompt. Now, if I want to use that in my app, all I have to do is go over to my app, and it's just like adding any other data source. So I can go over to add data. I can search for IT expert, which is the name of the prompt, or I can search for AI builder, and then we'll see all of the different prompts that are available there. So there we go. So these are all different AI builder prompts, and you see I've already added that here. So this is showing that this is a custom prompt as a data source in my app. Now that I have that, this is where the power comes in. So if we were to play this app, say I'm a user, I want to report an issue, okay? Maybe I click this question mark. So maybe I want to ask AI. So I could say, look, I have my Power Apps is having a delegation error. What do I do? I just ask AI, I call that model, and then it comes back with a list of things that I can do to troubleshoot this delegation error. So that's a really good example, and calling it is just like calling any other data source. So on this button here, I'm just calling that IT expert connector. I'm using the predict action, and I'm passing in the text that the user typed in the app. And then now I have that return. So it's lots of great use cases for what you can do with this. Okay, I got to be speedy here. Whether want to experiment with visuals and themes, I'll just keep these kind of short. So modern theming is coming. So right now we're kind of still limited to the native themes that we have in controlling, and I showed you how you can update modern controls to use a theme, but they are giving us the ability soon to be able to define our own custom themes that we can then use in our modern controls. So there's a blog post that talks about that. And then we can still have the ability to create our own themes manually outside of the theming engine if we want to. Other things to consider is the HTML control. I struggled if I should put this in here because big caveat here is to use sparingly because it does hinder performance. It hurts maintainability and it isn't accessible, but there are some edge use cases where it might be beneficial to use this if you want to have things like gradients or really need to have a requirement for additional CSS in your app. So it's basically allowing you to embed HTML and CSS in your Power App. The other thing to consider is to use SVGs. So this is a way to have animations and custom visuals in your app, which can really bring a nice something. So just a really fast example of this would be a loading animation like this, where it has this visual like issue reporting. That's all in SVG. And so to use SVGs, you just add in an image control, and then you can paste in some SVG code. Again, I have a video on this that explains further. There's lots of great content on how to use SVGs, but something to consider. All right, final tip, and we're right about time, is to containerize and componentize. If you aren't using containers and Power Apps to make your apps responsive, then you should start. So if you actually use Power Apps Copilot, it uses containers out of the box to create the app for you and make it responsive. So they're just basically, what a container is it holds a set of controls for you, and it helps to automatically reflow and resize all the controls so that it's responsive for you. So if you, something like this is an app built with Copilot, and this is a container for the gallery, this is a container for the form, and it just allows your objects to flow and be responsive. And then the final tip is to use components. Those are a way to build reusable building blocks of code that you can store in a central component library and then import into your other applications. So if you have dialog boxes that you want to build and use throughout a bunch of different applications, or standard controls that aren't there out of the box that you want to be able to build, a component is a great way to do that. And there's lots of resources out there on how to build those. And speaking of resources, here are all of the resources that you can reference for some more information about the samples and custom prompts and all of that. And wow, time flies when you're talking about Power Apps tips. I don't know. I think I actually answered all the questions in the chat too. So
you did.
Right on time.
Cool. I mean, totally excellent, on time, and all the questions answered. Fantastic. Great session. Really quick, but yeah, loads of information.
30 minutes goes by fast.
Yeah, it certainly does. Certainly does. Well, thank you for coming along, April. Really appreciate your time and coming in and chatting to everybody. If anybody has got any questions, you want to put them in the chat, we'll try and get those over to April. I'm sure she's going to stick around for a little bit longer. But very cool. That's always nice to hear. If you could jump into the feedback, let me just grab the link for you. That would be really appreciated.